Hello everyone, it's Blue here at Blue Bears Games, and for today's video, I will be unboxing the second and final Phyrexia All-Will-Be-One Commander Precon Corrupting Influence. This precon has a 3-color deck in it that is black, green, and white, and the suggested general is named Ixal, Scion of Atraxa, which is a 4-mana, 2/5 legendary Phyrexian angel with a whopping 4 abilities. The first 3 are simply the keyword abilities of Flying, Vigilance, and Toxic 2, but the 4th ability is what this deck appears to be based on, which is called Corrupted. Ixal's Corrupted ability states that at the beginning of your end step, each opponent who has 3 or more poison counters exiles the top card of their library face down. Then you may look at and play those cards for as long as they remain exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells. This ability has some things that I feel need to be explained a little further. First, the only person allowed to look at the face-down cards that were exiled is the owner of Ixal when they were exiled. Even if someone were to steal Ixal, the new owner cannot look at previous cards exiled, but they do get a new pile of face-down cards that only they can look at, assuming the corrupted ability triggers for the new owner. Second, I want to mention that Ixal's ability states that you can play the exile card, which means you can actually play lands exiled with the ability, but all timing rules still apply here. What that means is you can still only play 1 land per turn on your main phase. And lastly, I want to point out a really cool function of this particular corrupted ability. The way that it's worded means that Ixal doesn't even have to be in play for you to be able to look at and play the cards that were exiled by it. Normally, abilities are tied to the current existence of a card, and then if that card ever leaves play, it forgets anything that it did before. But with Ixal, that's not the case. Think of it as if though Ixal is a Time Lord from Doctor Who, the face may change, but the memories remain. So this deck looks like it will be a pretty neat poison counter deck with a lot of extra flair, so let's open her up and I'll show you just what's in the box. So I'll start by showing you the box. Here is the box. It has obviously the face commander. This is the Corrupted Influence Commander Precon. And then here's the back of the box. Again, more information. Like I said last week, the important part is what's inside the box, so let's rip this open. Take all the contents out. I'll show you what actually comes inside the box, and then we'll show you the contents in depth. So, like we always have with these, we have the new form, and I believe they changed that recently, but these are the old ones now. So we got the counters on it, and then of course on the back, I'll tell you this every single time I open one of these boxes and it has one of these. These are great for dividers for your cards, so keep them. Then we have the box itself. So let me just show you the front. It has the 3 colors the deck is. There's the side. The back is a pretty cool piece of artwork. And then that. And then we open the box up. At least this one didn't fall apart like last week's did. And we'll go through what's inside of it. So the divider, as usual, usually this is a theft prevention device. We got the life counter, which again is black. It's very just there's no markings on it, so it's nice for people who don't want to use it for anything other than just life counter. They don't want to use it for a specific deck. The insert, which has, of course, something about the deck on it. Some advertisements, I'm sure, and then nothing really too spectacular after that. So we can put that aside. We get the Phyrexia All-Will-Be-One Collector Booster Sample Pack, which last week's really sucked. And then we have the deck. So, like I start off with all these ones, I'm going to do the Sample Pack, and then we'll go from there. So let's open this up and see if we get anything at all, because last week's was just pure crap. So, open it up and see. Alright, you ready? Oop, I'm upside down here. Ooh, an Urtet. I actually needed one of these. I actually went out and bought one of these. I wish I didn't now. It's not a valuable card, but for me, I do a lot of mirror decks, so that's pretty cool. And then, oh, it was upside down. And then a Blight Belly Rat Showcase Foil. So, like I said, there's usually nothing too special. For me, the Urtet is actually special because I do a lot of mirror decks. It's one of my favorite things to make. So, I'm happy with it. I wish it was a foil one, but it wasn't. And unfortunately, I bought one, so that kind of sucks. But let's do this. The meat of the video here, and open the deck, and I'll show you what exactly the deck is all about. So first we split it up so that I can handle that. Now, I've already gone over what Ixal does, so we can skip Ixal for now, and I'm actually going to zoom in just a little bit more. There we go, now we can see everything. Alright, So the second commander that they suggest, which comes in foil, is Visgraz, Doom Hive. So this one's all 3 colors, so green, black, and white, and 2. So it's 5 total converted mana cost, mana value, for a 3/3 that has Menace, Toxic 1, and then whenever it enters the battlefield, you create 3 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifact creature tokens with Toxic 1, and that creature can't block. And then it gets +1/+1 for each poison counter an opponent has. Or that all of your opponents have, sorry. Alright, for the rest of the deck, we start off with the Ghostly Prison. That's a pretty good inclusion. It's a nice prison style, or a Staxy style card. Grateful Apparition. Billis Skull Dweller. It's a 1 that casts 1/1 with Death Touch. It's a Phyrexian insect itself. Then it has Toxic 1 itself. And Toxic, as I explained earlier, is that players dealt combat damage by this. They lose the life that the power of the creature was, and then they also get that many poison counters. So, I'm sorry, the Toxic part is the part that gives them poison counters. Infect is equal to the actual damage dealt by the creature. For Toxic creatures, the ability only counts whatever the Toxic is. That's why it's a lesser than Infect ability. Blight Belly Rat, 2 to cast, 2/2 with Toxic 1. So it proliferates when it dies, so more toxic stuff. So this deck is definitely toxic themed. Swords to Plowshares is good removal. Caress to Phyrexia, some card draw. Icarat, good inclusion, it's a great rat. Feed the Infection, it helps you draw cards, so you lose life, and then each opponent who has 3 or more poison counters loses 3 life. Night's Whisper, good card draw. Plague Stinger, 2 to cast 1/1 flying with Infect. Infect is the much better version of Toxic because this one says that it actually, when it deals damage to creatures, it deals it in the form of -1/-1 counters, and the damage is considered poison counters equal to its power. So if you buff the power of an Infect creature, you can get more poison counters on a player than the actual, what Toxic does. Infectious Inquiry, more card draw. Pestilent Siphoner, it's 2 to cast 1/1 with flying and also has Toxic 1. Oops, skipped one. Beast Within is removal. It destroys a permanent. Keep that in mind, it's a permanent, so it doesn't say non-land, so you can actually destroy land with this. And then, of course, they get to create a 3/3. It's just like last week's deck had the white version. Blade Mamba is a 2 to cast 1/1 with Infect and Regeneration. Carrying Call creates 2 Phyrexian insect creature tokens with Infect for 4. Cultivate, good. It goes and gets lands and puts them into play, so actual ramp. Evolution Stage, probably one of the better proliferate cards in the game. So it's a 3 to cast 3/2 that has landfall, and the landfall is that you proliferate every time you put a land into play. So that works really great with ramp cards, and in green, you have the options for a lot of them. Mycosynth Fiend is a 3 to cast 2/2 that gets +1/+1 for each poison counter that your opponents have. Noxious Revival, it is a Phyrexian mana, which means you pay either whatever the color is, which this one is a Phyrexian green, so you pay 1 green, or you can pay 2 life, and that's described here. And then you can put target card from a graveyard on top of its owner's library. That Emergence is a 5 to cast sorcery that lets you grab a creature from your graveyard and put it onto the battlefield under your control, and then you proliferate. And it says from a graveyard, not from yours, so you can grab it from your opponents if you want. Viridian Corruptor, 3 to cast 2/2 with Infect, and then when it enters the battlefield, you have to destroy target artifact. So it fizzles if there is an artifact on the board. Most likely there will be. Vraska's Fall, 3 to cast instant. It makes each opponent sacrifice a creature or a planeswalker, and then they get a poison counter. Moldavine Reclamation, 5 to cast enchantment. I love this card. It says that whenever a creature you control dies, you gain a life and draw a card. It's a good way for black and green to draw a card without actually losing life. Mortify, good targeted removal, really good targeted removal. Same thing with Putrefy, more targeted removal. Arcane Signet, because every deck that's a precon from WotC gets one. Apparently so is Commander Sphere, it's almost in every precon now. Contagion Clasp is a really good artifact. It's a 2 to cast that when it enters the battlefield, you put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. Most likely you're going to put it on your opponents, and then you can pay 4 and tap it to proliferate. There's another version of this that's rare, also like a $10 card that does proliferate. Norn's Choirmaster is a 5 to cast 5/4 with flying and first strike, and then whenever a commander you control enters the battlefield or attacks, you proliferate. That's pretty good. That's actually really good. Norn's Decree, a 3 to cast enchantment that says whenever one or more creatures an opponent controls deals combat damage to you, that opponent gets a poison counter, so that's really good. And then whenever a player attacks, if one or more players being attacked are poisoned, the attacking player draws a card. So This is definitely a nice little Infect style deck. 3-color one. Geth summons, 4 to cast sorcery. Return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. This one specifies your own. And then it has Corrupted, and that means that for each opponent who has 3 or more poison counters, as you cast this spell, you put up to 1 target creature card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So that's pretty good too, especially at 4. Phyrexia Outbreak, 3 cast sorcery. It says each opponent gets a poison counter. Then each creature your opponents control get -1/-1 until end of turn for each poison counter that the controller has. So that's actually pretty good too. Containment Grafter is a 5 to cast 5/5 trample toxic 1 creature. And it says whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to 1 or more players, you proliferate. And then it has Corrupted, and it says at the beginning of your end step, if an opponent has 3 or more poison counters, you draw a card. Then you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So not bad either. For 5 mana, it better be that good. Gliss's Retriever is a 6 to cast 6/6 with haste and toxic 3. It can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. And then it has Corrupted, and its Corrupted says that when it dies, you exile it. And then when you do, return up to X target cards from your graveyard to your hand, where X is the number of opponents that have 3 or more poison counters. We got Wormquake. It's a 6 to cast sorcery that has Corrupted and Flashback, but the Corrupted says that you create an XX green Phyrexian Worm creature token with Trample and Toxic 1, where X is the amount of mana spent to cast this spell. Then, for each opponent with 3 or more poison counters on them, you create another one of those tokens. And the flashback cost is 10, so you're going to create a 6/6 the first time, and if you flash it back, you're going to create a 10/10. Glistening Sphere, 3 to cast artifact. It enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters the battlefield, you proliferate, and then it has Corrupted that says that you can tap it to add 3 mana of any color, and you can only activate it if an opponent has 3 or more poison counters. Kind of like that. Fumigate, it's board wipe removal. It says to destroy all creatures, and you gain 1 life for each creature destroyed this way. Norn's Annex is Staxy piece. It's 2 Phyrexian white, so it's either 2 white or 2 life and 1 white, or 4 life and 3 colorless. And it's an artifact that is Staxy, or it's actually Pillow Fort, to be honest with you. It says creatures can't attack you or planeswalkers you control unless their controller pays a Phyrexian white for each of those creatures. So if they don't play white, they have to pay 2 life for each one. Phyrexian Rebirth is a 6 to cast sorcery. It's more board wipe removal. Destroy all creatures, then create an XX colorless Phyrexian horror artifact creature token where X is the number of creatures destroyed this way. So if 5 creatures total are destroyed, it's a 5/5. Seedborn Muse, a Stax piece. It's a 4 to cast 2/3 flyer that says creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 for each creature they control that's attacking you. Sorry, Pillow Fort, Stax, close enough. Painful Truth is card draw. It's not very good card draw, but it's card draw nonetheless. And a 3-color deck, I guess it could be construed as good. Phyrexian Swarmlord is a pretty good card, actually. It's a 6 to cast 4/4 with Infect. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, you create a 1/1 green Phyrexian insect creature token with Infect for each poison counter your opponents have. Scavenging Ooze is a 2 to cast 2/2 that you can pay a green and exile target card from a graveyard, and if it was a creature card, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, and you gain a life. Culling Ritual. I actually like this card a lot. It's a 4 to cast sorcery that says you destroy each non-land permanent, not creature, but permanent, and then with a mana value 2 or less. So if it's 0, 1, or 2 mana, it's destroyed. And if it has to be non-land, so it doesn't destroy lands, but it does destroy tokens. And then you get to add a black or a green for each permanent destroyed this way. Merciless Eviction, more board wipe. It's a 6 to cast sorcery that you can choose to either exile all artifacts, all creatures, all enchantments, or all planeswalkers. Chromatic Lantern, one of my favorite cards in the game for mana fixing. It's a 30 cast mana rock that says all of your lands now can tap to add a mana of any color instead of what they normally do, and it itself taps to add a mana of any color. Canopy Vista, it's got the types at least, so it's one of the lesser of the dual lands. Exotic Orchard is in every freaking precon. Fortified Village, so basic dual lands that are, budget friendly. Karn's Bastion is something I actually suggest in a lot of decks that deal with counters as an upgrade because they don't normally put it in a lot of precons. They did this time, so that's good. It's a land that taps to add a colorless, or you can pay 4, tap it, and proliferate, so that's really good for this deck. Necroblossom Snarl, it's the one that you have to reveal whatever the card type is that it can produce, the basic land type of it, or it comes into play tapped. This is the white-black version of that. Sungrass Prairie, it's a filter land. Temple of Malady, and Temple of Plenty. And then, of course, Temple of Silence, because it's a 3-color deck, so there would be 3 of them. Next part of the deck.
Fel Warstone, good mana rock for a 3-color deck because you're going to most likely hit a color you need. Golgari Signet. Grafted Exoskeleton. This one's an interesting one. It's a 4-cast equipment that the equipped creature gets +2/+2 and infect. This is good for comboing stuff, like if you have something that deals damage to things. So say something like Perforos, it deals 2 damage to each player. If it has infect, it deals poison counters instead, so you can hasten the game a little bit. Then it says whenever the grafted exoskeleton becomes unattached from a permanent, you sacrifice that permanent, and it equips for 2. So there's a small downside to it, but not really. Ichor Claw Mirror. If you've seen my Infect deck that I make, my little 60-card deck that I make and sell for 20 bucks, this is one of the main pieces of it. It's a 2-cast 1/1 with Infect, that when it becomes blocked, it gets +2/+2 at the end of turn. So it only does 1 Infect damage to a player, but it will deal 3 -1/-1 counters to a creature that blocks it. So it's actually pretty nice. Plague Mirror. It's a 2-cast 1/1 Infect that has to add a colorless. Soul Ring in every precon. Trailblazer Boots helps make your creatures unblockable. It gives them non-basic land walk, so any non-basic land on the board, if this is equipped to a creature, that creature is unblockable for that player. Bazooka Bog, blowing up somebody's graveyard. Command Tower. Corrosion Verge. It's actually a pretty good land. It's not technically a fetch land, but it's definitely a fetch land style card. It enters tapped, it taps to add a colorless, and then you can pay 2, tap it, and sack it to search your library for a forest card and a plains card. So you get to go search for 2. And it says card, not basic land. So if a card is a forest, but it's not a basic land, you can still go get it. And then obviously you put them onto the battlefield tapped and then shuffle. Myriad Landscape, enters tapped, taps static colorless, and you can sack it to go get 2 basic lands of the same type. Path of Ancestry. Cankerbloom, 2-cast 3/2. It's a fungus, so I like it already. And then you pay 1 and sacrifice it to choose to either destroy an artifact, destroy an enchantment, or proliferate. Sandstep Citadel, it's the non-Triome Triland. It enters tapped and taps to add 1 of the 3 colors. Tainted Field. Oh, they actually added Tainteds to this. I wonder if both of them are in here. So this taps to add a colorless, or it taps to add a white or black if you control a swamp. So let's see if the other one's in here. Expand the Sphere is a 4-cast sorcery. You look at the top 6 cards of your library. You put up to 2 lands, and it's not basic, 2 land cards from among them onto the battlefield tapped, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And if you put fewer than 2 lands onto the battlefield this way, you proliferate a number of times equal to the difference. So if you hit 2 lands, you just put 2 lands into play and you're done. If you hit 1 land, you put it into play and then you proliferate, and if you hit none, unfortunately, depending on your situation, you proliferate twice. Ah, there it is. They did put the second Tainted in here. So this one's the other version of a Tainted land. This one taps for black or green if you control a swamp. Noxious Assault. I've been putting this in some decks instead of like overrun effects because it's pretty similar. It's 5 to cast for a sorcery. Creatures you control get +2/+2 into end of turn, and then whenever a creature blocks this turn, its controller gains a poison counter. So you may be able to poison somebody out with just that. Unnatural Restoration is a 2 to cast sorcery that says return target permanent from your graveyard to your hand, and you proliferate. Venomous Brutalizer is a 4 to cast 4/4 with Toxic 3, and then when it enters the battlefield, you may pay 2, and if you do, you proliferate. Mirror Convert, it's 2 to cast 2/1 mirror that has Toxic 1, and you can tap it and pay 2 life to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Phyrexian Atlas, 3 to cast, it taps to add a mana of any color, and if you have Corrupted, which is if an opponent has 3 or more poison counters, it will, when it becomes tapped, each opponent who has 3 or more poison counters loses a life. And I think we're back onto just the basic lands. So we got plains, swamps, forests, and then we have the thick commander that they started adding instead of the oversized commander. So as you can see, it's a little thicker than the other cards. So I'll give you a little preview here. That's what the thickness of a regular card is. That's the thickness of the thick boy is what we call it. Then, of course, the counters. So obviously we're going to have poison counters because this is a poison deck. So 4 of them. And then we have Phyrexian Worm, Phyrexian Worms, Phyrexian Mites. That is a turn reminder card. On the back end, we have Phyrexian Insects, Phyrexian Horrors, Beast Tokens, and then more Phyrexian Mites.
So, yeah, that's what was in the Phyrexia All-Will-Be-One Corrupting Influence Commander Precon. Honestly, I was not expecting that. I was expecting a straightforward, get your opponents to 10 poison counters as quickly as possible kind of strategy, and that's not entirely what this is. Can this deck do that? Absolutely, and I wouldn't blame you for taking that route, but that seems kind of boring for what Ixal does. Ixel feels like it wants to toy with its opponents a little by getting them to 3 poison counters and then stealing their stuff. I find that to be much more fun and interesting, honestly. However, I know that most people are not like me and would rather win as quickly as possible, so that's what I'll focus on for tomorrow's upgrade guide. Let's see how I can get each opponent to 10 poison counters as fast as possible. So join me tomorrow to see what I've come up with. I'll either fail miserably or figure out a way to do it so fast that you may lose friends. Either way, it should be a blast. That's all I've got for you today, so unless you decide to go watch some of my other videos, which I would highly recommend, I will see you all tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Please be sure to give the video a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet.